right, we are live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today on Memorial Day with a discussion about Memorial Day. And I have with me here a very special guest, Karl KJ Johnson. Karl, please say hello to the people.
Hello, people.
There we go. Perfect. Now, KJ is the director of the C.S. Lewis Institute in Chicago, where he oversees programs that foster the discipleship of heart and mind. He's been a C.S. Lewis Fellow since 2008 and holds a master's in military studies and 2 masters of arts from Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. Now, KJ retired after 20 years in the Marine Corps, where he served as a helicopter pilot, operations officer, and weapons and tactics instructor. That's incredible. He's a veteran of numerous deployments, as well as multiple humanitarian assistant disaster relief missions. Most notably, Operation Unified Assistance from the 2004 tsunami, where he served as the air mission commander for former President George H.W. Bush and William J. Clinton. KJ, welcome to the discussion.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's a great bio. And so what we wanted to do today was just kind of talk a little bit about Memorial Day. KJ and I are both veterans. And obviously from his bio, I felt he was probably the best person to have this conversation with. I actually get questions usually every Memorial Day about the holiday, kind of the reason, the purpose for it, what it's all about, and kind of how to celebrate it. And so I thought, why not have a conversation kind of about it to kind of maybe help people understand it a bit more. And so KJ, let me just ask you the first question here. What is Memorial Day?
Well, Memorial Day, as opposed to Veterans Day, is a holiday that is specifically focused on remembering those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Whereas Veterans Day is the day to remember our veterans. So what's the main difference is Veterans Day are the people that are still around, guys like you and me who served. A couple facts, because I always forget this, but Memorial Day became a holiday, official holiday in 1971, but it really started a few years after the Civil War in about 1868. Veterans Day became a holiday in 1954. Really kind of found its grounding in around 1918 in the First World War, the Great War. But the main thing to remember is Memorial Day is we remember the fallen and those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, those that we lost in battle or something similar. And Veterans Day, so when folks come and ask me or try to thank me on Memorial Day, I don't admonish them, but I just remind them that that's not the point, and I appreciate it. But it's it's supposed to be a day of sober reflection to remember our fallen warriors. And I would add those who were left behind, like family members who have to continue to endure life without their loved one.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that. No, I've had that as well. People would come up to me and thank me on Memorial Day, and I would always kind of push back and appreciate the heart behind, that thankfulness. But to your point, that day really isn't for veterans, as you said, those that didn't make it home. I remember watching a commercial, and there was a World War II veteran, and maybe it was an interview he did, and the woman was really excited to interview him, and during the interview she said, you're a hero. Do you know you're a hero? And he said, I'm not a hero. Don't call me that, because I made it home, and the heroes didn't. So. In that same kind of vein, I think Memorial Day is for that. It's interesting. Usually on this holiday, I kind of recall an incident that happened in boot camp. So the saying goes, every Marine is a rifleman and every sailor is a fireman. And there's a reason for that.
Right.
And so when I was in boot camp, before you go through your fighting training, they sit us all down and they make us watch a video about the USS Forrestal. Are you familiar with that ship?
Yeah.
Right. 1967 was probably the worst fire ever on a naval ship. Actually, 134 sailors were killed that day and 161 were injured. But what was kind of the point, and the instructor there actually told us he wanted us to keep an eye on how many people ran into the fire. And that's what really stood out to me watching that, KJ, was, these big explosions were happening on the flight deck. This fire was, it was this giant wall. And yet you saw sailors running into it to try to save their shipmates. And so this sacrifice, this willingness to give your life up, every Memorial Day, I kind of think of that point in history and that horrific fire.
Yeah, it's a neat thing to remember. I mean, one of the things we talk about in the Marine Corps, and I know it's really not that much different, but heroes are the ones that run toward the sound of the guns, not away. I'm not going to try to draw too many parallels to what's going on, but I mean, we both know what's happening in the world right now, and we need more people that will run to the sound of the guns to try to address these sorts of things. Mm-hmm. We do need those who are willing to bear the sword to protect those who are defenseless. Mm. So, yeah,
that's good. And so, on this Memorial Day, especially, I do feel like there is a parallel to the gospel here. This idea of self-sacrifice, this idea of laying one's life down. There's a specific verse in John I'll throw up here, but it's greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. KJ, how do you see this connection with Memorial Day, with kind of the self-sacrifice, and then the gospel?
Yeah, well, I mean, anyone who's served, or even if you've watched a realistic war movie like Saving Private Ryan or something like that, while we like to point towards highfalutin ideals that we're fighting for country and things like that, and that's true, but when you're in the mix of it, you're fighting for the men and women to the left and right of you. You're fighting for your brothers and sisters, and that verse takes on real meaning, because how many times have you heard a story of somebody who sacrificed themselves for their unit, whether they jumped on a grenade or they charged a machine gun nest or something like that, and they do it, and I guarantee you what's running their minds probably not, I am fighting for apple pie and and freedom and the constitutional rights. At that point, they're in the near term, it's the mission, of course, but it's also protecting they figured the sacrifice is worth it to save their brothers and sisters in arms. So I think that's a very realistic and tangible way of living that out. So not the only way, of course, in this world, Yeah.
But. Yeah, no, I was surprised when I first joined and deployed. I had this vision of just everyone being super gung ho. And a term that you use in the Navy is someone who's Joe Navy. It's this idea of always squared away, boots are shined, haircut's perfect, uniform is ironed and creased, and everything this person does is for country, and everything they do. And there were some guys like that, don't get me wrong, but it was interesting to see this kind of the band of brotherhood. And to your point, when you're in it, you are fighting for that person on your left and your right, and you are willing to make that sacrifice for them. And so, I've seen that firsthand. It's interesting. KJ, have you, how many military funerals have you attended?
The answer is always too many. I don't have a count off the top of my head, but you serve long enough, you're going to go to your fair share. Especially, I was in aviation, so even in peacetime, there's always too many losses because it's an unforgiving business. So I'd say the last major one, I lost my roommate in 2010 when I was in Afghanistan. So he was shot down by an RPG.
Wow. Okay. Let me ask you this, KJ. How should people celebrate Memorial Day? It is a heavy
Yeah.
day for a lot of us. But what would you recommend? I mean, is it okay to say someone Happy Memorial Day and or let's go celebrate? How do you what do you think's best here?
Yeah, so in preparation for this, I did a little reading, and some folks I know in the military communities who are preparing, and some are much more somber and so much more serious. And I don't think we can fully expect those who have never put on the uniform or don't come from families or communities that have a strong tradition of that to really fully understand that impact. So I don't think everybody needs to walk around with, ashes and sackcloth and stuff like that. I think it's okay to say Happy Memorial Day, but at the same time, if you are circumspect enough, I think it's important to maybe take a few moments and remember what it is. And if you have a family, it would be a really great thing to do to talk to, take a moment or so, even if it's at the dinner table, to talk about the reasons for why we're doing all this, and just maybe a moment of silence or something. So the proximity you have to the actual military community, I think, will drive just how much you actually do. So
Yeah.
And if you are in that military community, I know some who get together and raise a drink or some sort of remembrance, or just a gathering.
You're right. I do think your proximity to military people, families, probably has a larger impact on this day specifically. But I like what you said about just taking a moment, and kind of pausing. I mean, I don't think people quite realize this, KJ, and maybe they do, but when you do enlist, when you do raise your right hand and swear an oath and join the military, you end up giving up your constitutional rights, quite a bit of them. And the idea is, that going into it ahead of time, and you will kind of surrender these rights so you can serve and protect those that can enjoy those rights. And so there is a huge sacrifice anyway when people join the military, and then obviously in certain situations when they give their own life for it. And so I think that's wise. I think just taking a pause and remembrance and just kind of being thankful for the fact that someone was willing to kind of give their life for you, if you will. I think that's right. Any other?
Well, in addition to giving up rights, it's the other things too. I mean, one of the things that, and I've come to be softer on this a little bit, but at the time when I was in the middle of it, when I used to hear friends of mine who would have to go on a business trip and they would miss their kids for a couple of days, I would just go, only a couple of days. I said goodbye to my family for a year. It only ended up being 7 months, but at the front end, when you're saying goodbye, I'll see you in 1 year, and you've got little girls and a wife that are just looking at you like, don't go, and you don't have a choice. Right. Now, you go into this knowing it. I'm not complaining about it.
Sure.
But that's another one of those, you're surrendering rights, but you're also surrendering a lot of time. So, I mean, I've probably missed at least 5 years of my family life. So that's a loss. That's something when you do see someone and you want to say thank you for your service, especially on Veterans Day. I mean, it's not just about, making the ultimate sacrifice. And it's not always about, someone who's been disfigured or maimed. There's a lot of other injuries. And I would also say, I know a retired general that's working with churches to help them recognize the moral. There's a category called moral injury that, takes a toll. Even if you're doing stuff, if you do everything in line with the rules of engagement, you're not breaking any rules. You do some of these things over and over. These aren't normal things that we do. And so it does affect the man or the woman who's serving. And so even as you thank people for their service, keep that in mind as well. And I would say keep a very intentional lookout for people in your congregation. You may not think yours is a military church, but you probably have men and women who've served. You may not even know that they served, and they're carrying scars with them. I know my own father had them, and in those days we didn't know what PTSD was. He did 2.5 tours in Vietnam, and now in hindsight, a lot of things make sense. That some of the things he struggled with was clearly PTSD, but we didn't have the categories. But we do that now, so we really ought to be on the lookout because, I mean, what are the statistics? Every 22 seconds or something like that, a veteran commits suicide.
Yeah.
We lose more veterans in peacetime and after the actual conflict. So even though somebody may not be lost in combat, we could still lose them down the road. And so that's something I think churches can really do, is rally in their communities to help veterans, whether they're a part of their church or not, help them reassimilate, help them get plugged back in, help them to get the mental health they need. A lot of these folks don't know what's available. Just the VA can be, there's some really good people in the VA. I'm not slamming them, but it's a bureaucracy like any other.
It can be tough. Yeah, sure.
And it can be tough. So the more churches can help their communities with folks like this, the better. And that's a tragedy too. I mean, we talk about what Memorial Day is versus Veterans Day, but if we're losing these folks, that's really sort of a delayed casualty. It's still a casualty. And we really need to find a way to tend for these folks. So it's not enough to go and do a Facebook challenge and do, you probably were on these where it's the 22 push-ups daily to remember that every veteran that we lose every 22 seconds and stuff like that.
Yeah, I saw that.
Or 22 minutes. I can't remember if it's every 22 minutes. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Something like that, yeah.
But anyways, that's like the ice bucket challenge.
Yeah.
That only goes so far. But really, I think the church has an opportunity here to reach into this gap to help those in need. And I guarantee you they're in your churches.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's well said, KJ. And just to add on to that, the families of veterans go through it as well. And so whether it's, husband or wife deploy or enlisted, that family enlists with them. I'll never forget in boot camp, our drill instructor said that if the Navy wanted you to have a wife, they would have issued you one. And I remember in that moment going, okay, so this really is geared toward kind of me giving up all of that, if you will. But obviously I did get married and both my wife and I served. But really families as well of veterans go through everything they go through. And it's extremely difficult for them. So even if you don't maybe know a veteran, I'm sure there's maybe family who are connected in that way and you can help minister to them as well.
Oh, that's a wonderful example. I had the advantage of being career active duty. And we usually lived on base, which is not always the case. But even if we didn't, we were living in largely military communities. So when I was deployed, the people around naturally knew, and there's usually a built-in support system. Yeah. You and I were neighbors, and you were deployed. We would come around Tyrena and check on her and see how things are going. But that doesn't happen in a lot of cases, especially for people who are reserved or live a lot more remotely. And I remember when I was in Afghanistan, our mutual friend Stuart McAllister called up or texted, I can't remember, but checked on my wife to see how she was doing. And that gesture meant a ton to me, and it meant a ton to her as well, because she knew she wasn't alone. So churches really, something as simple as showing up and mowing the lawn. Imagine essentially she's a single mother now. She's got 3 kids or something like that. I'm just making up a scenario, but 3 kids. Sure. She's got to mow the lawn. She's got to fix whatever's broken around the house because her husband's gone for 6 or 8 months or whatever it is. Having a church community come around you and your family like that can be a huge blessing. So I would say churches could be much more intentional in looking for some of those things too, so they don't feel isolated and alone. And of course, there's mental health concerns with that as well. And marriages, as well as I do, marriages in the military, the divorce rate is tragic.
It is.
Tragic.
It is.
So too many men and women coming home from a deployment to find their spouse gone.
Yeah, you're right. No, that's true. All right. Well, any kind of final thoughts here, KJ, about just Memorial Day and for those who, have sacrificed everything at this point, what are some closing thoughts we can do to encourage?
Let's end on a hopeful note. Those are some gloomy pictures. Yeah. But I think one of the hopeful things is if we do want to celebrate or at least feel appreciative about something, we still live in a country where there's no conscription. We have an all volunteer force. We don't lack for people who are willing to step up and serve, even inside. So, you could have pre 9/11 maybe made the joke that people only sign up to get, money for college.
Right.
But since 9/11, that reality is way behind us. If you sign up these days, that something real could happen.
Yeah.
So, but yet we still have our ranks filled. People still enlist.
Yeah.
They're still commissioning officers. So there's no shortage of good men and women who are willing to step up and serve. And I think that's wonderful, because while there may be a case to be made for some sort of conscriptive service, we don't need to do that here in the U.S. And what a great honor that is, that we still have. I feel great knowing that there's men and women out there that are willing to step in the gap.
Yeah, as do I. As do I. That's awesome.
I can't do it anymore. I'm too fat.
Right. Yeah, they won't have me. It's true. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, KJ. This was great. And for those of you that tuned in, thanks for joining the conversation. We hope this was helpful and encouraging, and gave you a little bit more insight on Memorial Day, a true day of remembrance, and thinking of those that sacrificed their life for this country, and also maybe thinking of the one who sacrificed himself for all of mankind. So thanks for joining us, KJ. Really appreciate it, brother.
Fun time.
All right. Until the next one, grace and peace.
Peace.